Ladies and gentlemen, it's my now great pleasure to introduce, first of all, the cast of Unbroken. Please welcome Finn Whittrock. Garrett Hedlund. Miyavi. Jack O'Connell. And the director and producer of Unbroken, Angelina Jolie. So, I have a million questions. I promise not to ask them all. But let's just dive right in to how you found these amazing characters. I mean, you had the novel, you had the story of Louis Zamperini, but how did you work with your team to actually find the characters you put on screen?
Well, we had the great fortune, all of us, of meeting Louis and spending time with him. And he was more remarkable than we could ever put on film. We lost him a few months ago, but even in his last days, he was so full of life and spirit and so strong. So it wasn't at all creating him. It was just really trying to live up to him, and it was hard for Jack, I know, but trying to make sure that we understood the message and Louis' message. And Louis said, make a film that's not about how extraordinary I am. Make a film that makes people remember that they all have strength inside of them and how extraordinary they are. So make it for the audience, and this is important message. And for I could go on. In the obvious character, obviously, it was very important that he was true to, as he was described, a very intelligent, very well-educated man, very striking, very violent, but also deeply conflicted, very complex human being. Fitzgerald was a great leader and a great man, a great father. Mac, we know little about his family, so we believe he's an orphan, and he went through quite a lot. It says a lot about why he behaved the way he did. So they're all, it was just for us to kind of fill the shoes. We didn't do anything but try to live up to these great people.
Jack, do you want to talk a little bit about the difficulty that she mentioned you had? And
yeah, I mean, it had to be difficult. It had to hurt to a degree. I had to be very uncomfortable and sometimes feeling out of my depth, I guess, because then I would at least be able to achieve, at least an essence or something then similar to what Louis might have experienced. And I constantly had Louis' example, Louis' account, dwarfing whatever strife I was going through. So yeah, when this is the case, we were all duty bound. I think it became a personal investment very early for all of us, as soon as we began to reckon with Louis and his legacy. So I felt very, very fortunate in the first place to be, considered, and then to actually have obtained the role. It all became necessary to at least feel a version of, a very tiny, filtered version of what Louis might be experiencing at these given moments. So, that was endlessly helpful as well, considering where Louis' psyche might have been at throughout. Certainly made the dieting a lot more reasonable, wouldn't you say, lads?
Garrett, you got to meet your real-life character as well. Was that possible, or was he?
No, I didn't, but here we good. I actually, it's kind of funny. It was a really big surprise. It was actually the same day I got to meet Louis, which was also, I'll never forget it. I mean, when you get to meet, a hero, this was quite remarkable, because I'd been a fan of his story and inspired by it for years before, and I'd have friends that hadn't been aware of his story, and we'd be hanging around, and I pull up anything and interview on him, or something from past Olympics that had showcased, you know, a wonderful bit and Uprising, his everything he'd been through. I had, when I was reading the book, it mentioned Fitzgerald here and there, and but he was kind of more prolific in the index of the book, because whenever I'd look up something in the back or reference of a page, it'd be like, you know, this reference, Laura referenced John Fitzgerald's diary. John Fitzgerald's diary. This is from his diary. And so I'd went with the producer, Matt Baer, to go meet Louis, and which I can't say enough about this experience. First and foremost, that Angie told me to not show up empty-handed, so I brought him a box of cookies. But it was a remarkable sort of meeting, and I had expressed everything I'd known about Fitzgerald, or what I could find out, and this great little story that he'd led, and Louis, he seemed very pleased about that and smiled, and we walked outside, and Matt Barrett said, I have another surprise for you. We got the diary coming. And that's as close as I came to meeting the character, but it seemed sort of quite, it seemed easier than you would imagine, because his heart was kind of on these pages, and not vulnerably, but sort of the opposite. He didn't seem beat by all the wear and tear. He'd say, questioning today, nails pulled, rations decreased, Mother's Day, I think, hope to be there for the next one. My son's birthday, hope to be there for the next one. And there was such this strength that came out. I don't know if it's just the generation that was able to like press down all the trials and tribulations and not show any defeat or fear or weakness, but he sure was, you know, he in his diary was kind of the epitome of that, but also with a nice sense of humor and a nice sort of wholehearted longing to return to his family, which I find was the fight that allowed these guys that did survive to sort of make it to the end. But yeah, that's it.
And Miyavi, was not possible for you to meet the sergeant or the bird, I guess? I don't know his real name.
No.
No.
He passed away when he was
did pass
86
away.
years old,
Okay.
yes. Louis actually lived the longest of all of the, everybody passed away.
But it must have been incredibly intense to create that character and bring that character to screen. Did you find any help in resources? Were there journals or notes about him that you referenced?
Yes. It was hard. It was a tough process. You know, first of all, as a Japanese, I didn't want to represent any negative side of Japan, the country I was born and raised. And the story is really controversial. The book is not even translated in Japan. So I didn't know about this history before I got this offer. And then, so I was initially hesitant to tackle this role because, you know, I was scared. It's really risky. I'm a musician. I slap the strings, not people. Just, I've never used a bamboo stick in my life. So, yeah, I was not sure if I was capable as an actor, because no experience as an actor. But after I met Angie in Tokyo, it's all cleared. And she said that, she wanted to make some creation meaningful, which could be a bridge between America, Japan, even the countries which have been having similar issues in conflict. So it's not about the war, it's all about the message of Louis Zamperini, forgiveness, unbroken spirit, and how strong a human being can be. So that's why I was able to make a decision to tackle this role. And then to portray the bird, such a brutal, cruel, complicated, and complex character. Angie and I had many, many conversations. And then we didn't want to portray him as a typical villain who's one-dimensional. We wanted to put more depth and humanity and a little respect into the character as an actual person. And I had no chance to meet the bird. He passed away in 2003. But we're able to find the article he wrote about how much he wanted to see his mother while he was hiding in the mountain for 7 years. And he was escaping from his criminal acts. But at the same time, from the article, you were able to find his humanity and weakness. He was also scared. He was also struggling in his position. So as an actor person, we wanted to put humanity into the character. That was my mission. And that was it's really hard process. Even on set, I had to keep the distance from the actors. I really wanted to hang out with everyone, but you know, we couldn't. Even like Japanese guards, I kept the distance. You know, I was in the bar. I was so isolated, lonely person. So, yeah.
Finn, your character also had to deal with, you know, this kind of conflict, right? I mean, he had weaknesses that, right at the outset, but then eventually went out strong.
Yeah, I think he has a sort of inner weakness that he tries to confront during it. But I think that you know, in the movie he's and in real life, I think he's sort of like portrayed as the opposite of Louis in a way, and that Louis always had, I think, some kind of internal well to draw from of strength, you know. And I think that Mac didn't have that, and I think, you know, a lot of us might not have that if we were put in that situation. We all want to think of ourselves as, you know, we would be the heroic ones, you know, in that if we were faced with that kind of life and death thing. But, you know, maybe we wouldn't, you know. And I think actually the bizarre thing is that a person can have hope in a time of such despair, you know. Yeah, and I think that Mac first, you know, he has a sort of initial panic, which gets him to eat the chocolate. How many times did I eat the chocolate today? I've said it.
I would have definitely eaten
and
the
then
chocolate.
I think that his guilt from doing that, from destroying the rations, really creates a downward spiral into himself, and that once his mind goes, his body is sure to follow. And I think that's what's kind of amazing. Is that
So this idea of mind and body, we
Yeah.
spoke a little bit about it earlier when you arrived. That's what really struck me, other than this incredible story of just a phenomenal individual and the people that were part of this period of his life, but that this is really an incredible examination of the body and what it's capable of when it's pushed, and the mind, and how the interaction between what the body is capable of and what the mind will allow it to do, or stop it from doing, or hurt it in some cases. And I guess I'm just putting this question to everybody. I mean, how difficult was it to do the physical? This was a very physical film, and meld that with the psychology in the film, which is also very intense. And I'm just wondering, I mean, if it helped to have a director who has been very physical on film before, and maybe you could put your trust in her. I'm just guessing because you know she was capable of doing it herself.
Right.
Yeah.
Jack, maybe, I don't know if you want to lead off on
Well,
that.
there were times I'd arrive on set and Angelina would be rehearsing my stunts before I turn up feeling emasculated in actual to a degree. And yeah, I mean, the mind will always allege to yourself that you're about to give up, that your body's going to give up way before its actual tolerance level. And some of us, you know, the vast majority of us in this room, perhaps never going to have to push our bodies and ourselves to that sort of extreme anyway. So to be in a position where we can portray a true story that does, you know, remind us of those sort of boundaries and possibilities within them, that became very important to us, I think. You know, I like the term human spirit for all of this. I might have said human spirit the same amount, Finn, you've said at the chocolate.
Eat the chocolate.
Yeah, I think today anyway. And I think once you have these things in tune anyway, you know, your physicality, your mentality, spiritually also, you know, you're capable of all sorts. And then I guess the allegation is that that we suggest, or the book suggests, the story suggests that Mac didn't have that. There was something that Mac didn't have mentally or spiritually that physically made him unable to survive. Louis, we're saying, could physically endure because he was conditioned to with his Olympic feats. And then we say Phil had a faith, had a spirit, to elevate him, to elevate them all from wherever they was at the time, whether it be the raft or the prison camps.
How did you prepare your team for the great physical efforts that they would have to put out, and also the psychological bit?
Again, I think everybody came into this. We have such a respect for the men who came before and really went through this. So there was absolutely nothing they could suffer that was remotely comparable to what these men actually went through. And we all knew that. It was never a question. No one ever complained. But when you speak about the mind and the spirit, and there's something we can't even understand, that Louis held that beam over his head, and it's on record. It's all the other prisoners wrote in their individual diaries. He held it over his head for 37 minutes and never dropped it until he was beaten. And he could never explain it himself, what that was that took over, because Jack tried to actually hold
On you out, Jack. Yeah, how long could you hold it, Jack?
36. I think I did about 36.
And is clearly physically much stronger than Louis would have been in that moment. And I mean, fainted. Almost blacked out and had It seems it's impossible. It's impossible, like when somebody explains that a mother lifts a car when their child's under it. There's something, and I think that there's something very interesting in that to remember to tap into about the individual will. And as Jack said, it comes with not just the strength of will, but a sense of faith and a connection to mind, body, and soul.
Well, spirituality is another theme of the film that runs through, and Louis has a struggle with it, at least at this period of his life, right? I mean, he's exposed to God early in his life, we're shown, but really his faith seems to be in himself for most of the movie, that he learned from his athleticism, from his family, his brother, but then I guess later in life he came to God. Was that a really important part of telling this story, to involve that spiritual element for him, or just throughout?
Absolutely, it is a part of it's Louis'. It's part of his message to he had a very strong faith, and it's very, very important. And what was also important to us is that that faith would be a part of this story, and we would understand how he came to it, how he was raised, and what he learned along his journey, and where he questioned faith, and where he kind of came to the light, or to something that he believed in. But we also wanted to make a film that would also be for audiences that are not people of strong faith. And it was important to Louis as well. It wasn't just a movie for a particular faith or his individual faith, but that it should be universal. And so we tried to balance that and approach faith that way.
So, Miyavi, I actually asked myself this question about the bird, whether he was also driven by a belief or a commitment to God, and our understanding, or my understanding at least at that point, was the emperor was seen as a kind of earthly incarnation of a god, or if he was more tortured by demons.
Can you speak slowly, please?
I'm sorry.
I'm not good at English.
Yeah, I apologize. Do you think the bird was more committed to the idea of a god in the emperor or in Japan, or if he had more demons, if he was more tortured than?
I don't know. Just, I'm not in a position to represent any kind of things like that. But in that era, everyone was under command. Everyone was suffering, and then especially in an extreme condition. And then we came down to believe that he was also tortured internally. He had issue with his father when I was a child, and then that's the similarity I got between him and me. I was also in a professional soccer team, and I got injured, and I got kind of some trauma when I was a child. So he was also trying to release his evil kind of feeling by torturing people, and he wanted to be like Louis. Louis is the guy he wanted to be, and he achieved. He wanted to achieve. He wanted, but he couldn't. But Louis had everything, what the bird wanted. So they're really alike, but the bird knew that he couldn't break down Louis. So the scene in the very end, physically, the bird was beating and winning, but mentally, he knew that he was losing. He couldn't break down the Louis. So spirituality is really important. Even I was praying every day, because this thing is for everyone who sacrificed, and then everyone was a victim. There's no winner. So I'm not sure how much he believed in God, but just humanity was really the most important thing.
So you've already said that you were not going to hug it out with the crew after to stay in character, but I'm just wondering, this must have been a really intense bonding experience for the cast and the crew, and really intimate, especially maybe even on the raft scenes. Any stories
that's for sure.
about the intimate bonding on that?
I think the first day we actually tried to get all three of you in one raft
figure
to
it
try to
out.
figure out whose foot goes where and how would you sleep when you were.
How many days was
Doing
that?
one.
Were you on the water, or whatever water that happened to be?
I think it was about 2 weeks at the we shot the second half of the raft stuff first. And I think that was about 2 weeks, and then it was like a week or so during the healthy phase at the beginning. Yeah. But yeah, there's no way not to get to know a buddy if you're starving and cold and hugging each other all the time,
Just the one tragic raw fish to share between us.
So that's a real raw fish that we ate.
How many times did you have to eat that fish?
Yeah.
That was really bad,
Yeah, a couple.
You could
I
tell too
blocked it
because
out.
we couldn't we couldn't get a matching fake fish that was made of something else, and so we had it's your boys and it's pretend
It's like
you're
sushi.
bored,
We're like,
it's
it's sushi.
It's a-
Yeah, it's
We're getting an
illegal to
image
eat raw
of
fish.
Ms. Jolie as a director. Just eat the fish.
We got all these real fish,
Japan.
and you could see. We did a few. They'd pass it around, and you could see the ones that were okay because they'd eat them, they'd take bites, they'd talk, and then you could see when they got a bad fish, and there was this they take a tiny bite and try to pass it quick, and we had a tiny little thing hidden of mouthwash on the bottom of the raft. That was all we gave.
We had hair of yak testicle for beards
Excuse
as
me,
well.
say that again? What was that?
Well, there were certain times when our beards weren't. They had to put them on.
No, this is part of the process. This was an integral part of the process.
And we learned.
Yeah, testicle.
It was testicle hair, Angie. I'm telling you, it was. It's the most fitting
just
version
thought it
of
was
hair
yak
out
hair
there
in
is on the
general.
testicle of a yak somewhere
It was
in
on my face,
Australia.
dude.
And yeah, but it was on the fish. We were eating
But
raw
they're funny,
fish
the-
complemented
the-
with
the-
yak baller.
Because we shot in and out of order, so sometimes we shot the end first, and then they had their beards grown and they were very skinny. And then when we came back and shot the beginning of the raft, they couldn't
We
grow
had
out their
to
facial
do
hair.
some
So a lot of the scenes was actually hand-laid hair on their faces.
By hair.
And when they ate the fish, it mixed together.
And then you pass it to the next guy. Bon appetit.
Apparently it has something to do with a yak, but I'm not.
They now call me Yak the Lad. Heroin.
It's all protein. But on a more serious note, I mean, how did you develop the trust, especially in the really intense scenes in the camp, where some of that looked very, very intensely real? I mean,
Yeah, we kept a distance between ourselves.
Yeah.
And that helped for something organic in front of camera. In terms of trust, I guess there's not a great deal of time to think about that or build that even. I benefited from Miyavi's preset soccer skills in the scene post.
Accurate?
Huh?
Is it accurate? Kicking.
Yeah, you managed to leave enough room for it to look believable and not injure me.
Yeah.
I'm still thankful for that, Miyavi.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, by about the third take, there was a level of trust there. But yeah, that has to be found relatively quickly. I mean, look, in all seriousness as well, by the time we were on the raft, very early, there was a general consensus. Everyone felt very fortunate to have had any part in in the process of making this film. And so I felt like I hit the ground running with all of the cast. I was very fortunate again to be surrounded by not only professionals but very committed, hard-working actors. And you know, it certainly helped us, as I say, hit the ground running. You know.
Yeah, and you know, it often, you know, you never know what you're going to get when you walk into a movie. You know. But it kind of felt like a jigsaw puzzle that it all come together once, like in terms of the cast sort of fitting, you know. And at first you think that's like just a miracle, and then you realize that actually Angie cast this movie for like a lot of time, you know, and a lot of months, and really thought every single particle through. And so once we had gotten there, you know, a lot of the work was done for us just by the virtue of who we were playing with, you know.
Well, it's very clear that you put a ton of thought into this. I mean, I have to say, just on top of the amazing performances, it's an incredibly beautiful film. And if you win Roger Deakins his first Oscar, I will love you forever. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He deserves it. He deserves it.
But, so just my final question. Did Mr. Zamparelli ever get to see any images of these guys in action before? I know he didn't get to see the film, unfortunately.
He saw the film. He was,
he did?
when he went, it wasn't the final film with all the visual effects and everything and all the music, but when he went into the hospital, we put it on my laptop and I held it over him and he watched it.
Well, that's a beautiful image to hold on to. Congratulations, everyone. And
Thank you.
best of luck. Thank you so much. Unbroken.